Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the John Riley Project. How are you? It's February 12th, 2025. And man, I got so much pent up content that I want to share with you. We're going to talk today about some things going on in my hometown of Poway, California. There's been a lot of controversy with one of our city council members, Tony Blain. There's been some new news with another city council member, Peter DeHoff. We're going to break down some of those news stories. Want to tell you a little bit about my experience. I was up in Escondido last weekend, and there was a big immigration rally, anti-ICE protest. I want to share with you my thoughts and opinions on that. And then there's just all kinds of other stuff going on the national level with Trump and this flood the zone thing that's going on. And I've just got some top of mind thoughts there. So thanks for joining me. I welcome you to be participant in this podcast. This is sort of like our community forum. So if you have any thoughts or opinions, you can always drop your comment in the live chat on Facebook, on X, or on YouTube, and we'll get you involved in Fans Forum. And by the way, I'm in a whole new studio. We moved the studio out of my living room. My beautiful wife has put up with me for having my studio in the living room forever. It's been there for years. And now now we're empty nesters. I've converted one of the bedrooms into the new studio, and I've been working on it. I got these curtains going on. I've been installing acoustic tiles on the ceiling to try to get the acoustics and the sound just right. So it's just all part of the project, the John Riley Project, and I'm glad to be here with you. Just a couple of plugs before we get started. If you're interested in learning more about what I do, you can always go to my website, johnrileyproject.com. You want to connect on social media, go to connectwithjohnny.com. If you want to follow on YouTube or on social media on Instagram. And if you have any questions or comments, someone you'd like to be a guest, like to recommend somebody, maybe you want to be a guest, just go to johnrileyproject.com and type it in there, and we'll get you involved. And by the way, I do another podcast twice a week with Lee Hacksaw Hamilton, the godfather of sports talk radio. So if you are into sports, we talk Major League Baseball, football, NBA, hockey. I mean, you name it, we cover it. If you're interested in sports, make sure to look up Lee Hacksaw Hamilton wherever you get your podcasts, including on YouTube, streaming on X, streaming on Facebook, etc. And that's a twice a week gig. And that's part of the reason I'm not doing the John Riley Project as often as I'd like. I just run out of time. So I'm just trying to really prioritize what I'm doing. Okay, let's get started. And I want to talk first about Tony Blain. Tony Blain is our newly elected council member for District 2 in Poway. Tony Blain is in big trouble. Tony Blain has been blowing up Poway. So I don't know if you're following in the news. It's gotten a lot of local news coverage from journalists at the Voice of San Diego, at the San Diego Union Tribune. It's been on television, local news. I just want to break down what's happening, because I can give you probably better insight than what a lot of other people could share. What's happening here with Tony Blain in the city of Poway? What did he do wrong, and what does the future look like here? Okay, well, first of all, Tony Blain was elected in the November election last year to represent District 2 in Poway. We've broken Poway up into 4 districts. So we have 5 people on our council, and 4 of them are council members. And then we have Mayor Voss. And District 2 is sort of kind of North Poway. It's like Green Valley, and it's the new farm, where they're building that brand new development off of Espola. It's all the Bridalwood, like kind of around Poway High School. Roughly speaking, that's District 2. I think it might stretch a little bit south along the east side of Poway Road, the east side of Espola Road, and probably include High Valley, I think, is part of District 2. So Tony Blain won that election in November. He defeated Jared Wilson, who was kind of the establishment pick, as well as Vanessa Springett, who was a local active leader for the Green Valley Civic Association. And Tony Blain won with a plurality. He got, I can't remember what the exact percentages was, but it was like 38%, 40%. It was something like that. It wasn't a 51% majority. It was a plurality. He got the most votes, but more people voted against him for him. But, he won and he got elected. And during his campaign, we saw glimpses of what we're getting now. Tony Blain, of course, was very aggressive as a campaigner. In fact, I live just on the other side of the boundary of District 2. I live in District 3. And when I leave my immediate neighborhood, I'm driving through District 2, and I saw all kinds of Tony Blain signs and saw him active on Facebook. And when he first popped up on the scene, I was initially encouraged by Tony Blain because he was for term limits. And I think term limits are a good policy. But, as this campaign started going on, you started realizing that Tony Blain is going to be a little bit like a bull in a china shop. I mean, he was threatening to fire some city leaders. I don't remember if it was the city manager or the city attorney. He was threatening to recall Peter DeHoff in District 3. In fact, before he was elected in November of 2024, during October, right before the election, when you think he would be focusing on winning District 2, he was out in District 3 knocking on doors trying to build a campaign recall of Peter DeHoff, which was odd. Now, granted, he won the election in District 2, so I can't really criticize the strategy that much, but you normally would think that if you're not focusing on your immediate election, you might come up short. But he was a three-way race, and it just all kind of worked out in his favor. So he gets up on city council. He was, I think, took the oath of office in mid-December, I think around the December 10th or 15th, kind of right in that zone. And we had a couple of other new faces. We had Jenny Maeda, who was representing District 4, who defeated incumbent Kalen Frank. And then, of course, we had, Brian Pepin, who announced his resignation shortly after the November election. And his seat was unoccupied for a while. Now they've just made a replacement. They've used Chris Pikus has won that assignment. And then, of course, there's Peter DeHoff, who's been on council now for a couple of years. And then Mayor Voss, who's been the mayor since 2014. And I think he won election on the city council in 2012, if I recall. So, he's the longtime member up there on the board. So Tony Blain, campaigned on this whole idea. We're not going to do any backroom deals. We're going to get rid of the corruption at City Hall in Poway. We're going to, go after some of these corrupt officials, some of these corrupt city leaders, and we're going to get rid of them. We're going to start, moving these guys out the door. And he was very aggressive about it. And, that kind of a message can resonate with a lot of voters, particularly voters that have been very unhappy with all the development that's going on in Poway, on Poway Road, on Espola Road, and other parts of the community. There's been a transformation in our city and the country with all these new townhomes and apartment buildings and, and the farm with all of its single family homes and duplexes. But, this is indicative of what's going on all across the state. There's a housing shortage. There's a lot more building going on. But a lot of the folks in Poway, particularly the NIMBYs, don't want more construction. Or there's other people that just generally don't want more hassle, more traffic, et cetera. And there's been an uproar because Poway Road has been flipped on its ear. And so you would think, he's going in there saying, hey, we're going to get rid of these guys. We're going to get this guy out of office. We're going to kick this guy out. And again, I understand how that message resonates. So he gets up on the city council, and right away he is making quid pro quo deals. And what was amazing is that he was doing the kind of backroom dealing that he was criticizing other people for doing when he was running. The only difference is that he was doing the dealing in public, but it was still the unethical sort of quid pro quo. I mean, there were cases where, where Tony Blain told Peter DeHoff, I'll, take down my recall effort of you. I will promote you for deputy mayor if you agree to do an election in District 1 to replace Brian Pepin. There was some of that, you do this for me, I do this for you. Okay, now, we all know that politicians do that. I mean, you would be naive not to think that sort of thing happens. But usually that's what they do in the backroom deals, right? I mean, he was doing it out in public. He was doing it in the council meetings. He was doing it on Poway City email. And this is apparently a violation of the law. And I don't know all the detail here, but it got to the point where people were frankly very angry about this. I know the city attorney was fuming when Tony Blain was calling him out. And people were warning, they saw this coming, based on the way Tony Blain was campaigning. And sure enough, he's in office, and like a bull in a china shop, he's kind of creating a lot of chaos. And it got to the point that it was so bad that they had to censure him. What's a censure? It's kind of like a slap on the wrist. I think Mayor Voss called it a public scolding in one of his interviews on the television news. It was a formal declaration that, hey, man, what you're doing ain't right. It ain't ethical. And it frankly might be illegal. So it was incredible how this all built up. There was a lot of effort to kind of get organized around for this censure. And then I watched the meeting. What was it, last week? The meeting where they made the decision on the appointment of the District 1 replacement for Brian Pepin. There was also the enaction of the censure on Tony Blain. And where was Tony Blain? Didn't show up at the council meeting. And I thought, man, this is weak sauce. This is not a good look. If you believe in what you say, if you believe your campaign promises were righteous and moral and virtuous, and you're being attacked by other people, you have to go in and defend yourself and fight back. And he wasn't doing that. And I'm thinking, that's a weak sauce for a politician. That's a really bad look. And so that meeting, there were only 4 of them up on the dais. Is that how you say it? D-A-I-S, or is it dais? I always get that word mixed up. But at any rate, he wasn't even there. And it was like an empty chair. It was like Clint Eastwood at the GOP convention 25 years ago with the empty chair right there on stage. So what is going on with this guy? It's just surprising to me. Now, it is interesting because, I ran for office, 11 years ago, for school board. And, when you're running for office, it's only natural to sort of have that fantasy of, if I'm elected, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to say this and say that and call this out. And new council members should do that. I mean, if you are elected and you're successful, you're representing the people, you have a new voice, a voice that resonated with the people, and you owe it to yourself and the people that voted for you to fight for the agenda that you campaigned on. Okay, which is great. But there's a way to do it and there's a way not to do it. And what we're dealing with now is Tony Blain has a way that he wants to do it differently, and as a result, he is just blowing up bridges, blowing up Poway as he goes along through this process. So I don't know when the next council meeting is. It might be in another week or so, and we'll find out if Tony Blain actually shows up. I'm just interested to hear what his response to all of this is going to be. And already people in the community are upset about this. I mean, you should have seen some of the speakers that came up at the meeting, speakers that live in Tony Blain's District 2 that wanted to talk to him. And then he refuses to talk to people on social media or on email, but he says he'll meet you for a cup of coffee. And you're like, wait a minute, I can't have a conversation by email or by phone, even with my council member, my representative. And then this woman said that she wanted to schedule a sit-down meeting with him and asked him, can I record our conversation? And Tony Blain said no. And again, another bad look, and this particular person in front of city council was, having all sorts of personal attacks on Tony, questioning his mental health on all of this. And so it's kind of like the end does not justify the means, which I think is a really important, principle that at least I follow, is that you may have righteous ideas on what you want to implement, but there's a way to go about it. Not only staying within the letter of the law, but more importantly, not being an a-hole as you go through the process, not demonstrating the hypocrisy of you campaigning against backroom deals, and now you're doing the deals. You're doing the kind of unethical behavior that you were angry about. So this, to me, is something. And by the way, he has already announced that he's running for mayor of Poway in 2026, like in 2 years. So this is remarkable. I was in one of the Facebook groups, and we have a bunch of different Facebook groups here in Poway, and one of the people there posted, he goes, you should go read his reviews. and he's a doctor. So and there's other kind of health websites that are sort of like the Yelp for doctors. He got a lot of negative reviews out there as well. So we're going to see more here about Tony Blain. I mean, is there going to be an effort to recall him? There's a lot of people that are demanding that he resign. Is he going to fight through this? Is he going to stick to his original campaign principles? Is he going to show up for the next Poway City Council meeting? So, to me, it's a bad look, and it's, maybe it's a popular trend now with Donald Trump, going out there saying what's unfiltered, saying what's on your mind, going to do this, going to do that. And I think some of that is sort of that energy, some of that strategy is channeling through Tony Blain. But, we've been a city here in Poway since 1980. I think this is the first time a city council member has ever been censured, has ever been publicly scolded by the other city council members and the mayor. So keep an eye on this. It's just funny. It's just that Poway, we're like a nice little suburban neighborhood, and it's a great place to raise a family. You got pretty good schools here, good school district, parks, walking trails. I mean, a lot of really nice people in town. But we seem to get quite a bit of drama. If it's not the $1 billion bond with our school board, it's the water crisis and the boil water ordinance. It's, there was a recall on Mayor Voss a couple of years back. There's the corruption of John Collins when he was the Poway School Board superintendent. And oh my gosh, we had the Chabad shooting here in Poway, which was tragic. So I wish Poway would be in the news, maybe for some more positive things rather than some negative things. So tell me what you think of Tony Blain, council member, District 2 here in Poway. Good guy, bad guy, fighting for a righteous cause, or, going about it unethically, immorally, maybe even illegally. Tell me what you think about Tony Blain. Drop your hot take in the live chat on Facebook, X, or YouTube, and we'll get you involved in the conversation. I try to make this a community forum, and so if you're on the live stream, that's your way to get involved. Okay, let's move on, and I want to talk a little bit now about another Poway City Councilman, and it's Peter DeHoff. Now, there's a couple of angles to this whole story here. Peter DeHoff is the council member for District 3, and he's my representative. I live in District 3. I don't think I've ever met Peter. Obviously I've seen him up on city council. I've seen him on social media. He's even been a participant in the community forum here on the John Riley Project podcast. And Peter, thanks for being involved in the community. Well, there's a lot of people that are angry with Peter DeHoff right now. There are a lot of people that are calling for his resignation. So this is incredible. I mean, we got Brian Pepin stepped down. There was a controversy about an appointment or an election to replace him. They ended up doing the appointment. Then we have the whole Tony Blain, situation that's blowing up, and everything that's coming along with the censure and, potential illegal activity. And now there's a recall of Peter DeHoff that's brewing. And I'm not sure if organizers around this, how far along they are, but it's interesting how this is all coming forward. Now, I'm trying to pick up the vibes on some of this. Some of this is that I'm privy to a certain amount of information. Some of it, frankly, I've been blocked from being able to view some of the conversation on this, but I'm going to tell you what I know. And if there's additional comments, facts around this situation, or if I need to be corrected, by all means, let me know, either in social media or here in the live stream. But there are a lot of people now that are really angry with Peter DeHoff for a number of different reasons. I mean, in one of the most recent meetings, he gave like a 20-minute, essentially, bully pulpit speech up on the die. And a lot of people really didn't like that. They felt he was being condescending and talking down to people. There were a lot of other challenges that Peter DeHoff was receiving. They didn't like his stance about housing. They didn't like his stance about Lifetime Fitness, and they're just tired of him, and they want him to go. And so you're finding that, here in Poway, we have sort of a vocal minority. And these are folks, I mean, one of the figureheads of that group is Chris Cruz, and there's a number of other names. If you're on Poway social media, you know many of them. But they're a loud voice, but they're definitely a minority. And they've historically lost every election until Prop H, where the Lifetime Fitness facility that was proposed on the farm that was going to change the plan to allow this, massive 90,000 square foot facility and, indoor, outdoor, which was dramatically more than the 3,000 square foot plan. When that was implemented, and when that plan came forward, the city council approved it to the point that, they said it complied, or they made modifications to zoning to say it complied, and then put it up for the vote for the city council. Well, this vocal minority was upset with that. Of course, they wanted it to lose, and it did lose. I mean, there was a very unpopular loss. I think it was like 31% yes, 69% no on this Prop H for the fitness. What was it called? It was Fitness Elite, if I'm trying to remember the name. And so Peter DeHoff was supportive of that. He's been, according to some, speaking down to other council members, and has been, a guy that a lot of people have been just kind of fed up with, and they just were tired of him. And they said, we need to get rid of this guy. We need to have a recall on Peter DeHoff. I'm just kind of going here back to my notes. And excuse me, here it is. They were upset that he was aligned with Mayor Voss. There was an unwillingness to listen to city citizens in Poway. They just didn't like his whole act. They didn't like his whole presentation. And they certainly didn't like a lot of his commentary on social media. So it's interesting. There's been a lot of anger here in town on various levels, but the vocal minority, in my opinion, I think is feeling empowered. They're feeling that, maybe they got a little bit of wind on their back, wind in their sails, and that they might be able to capitalize on making some other changes here. And when I first saw this recall initiative, I was surprised at first. I mean, because this, generally speaking, the loud minority in Poway, many of them were very supportive of the recall of Mayor Voss a few years ago. And that initiative didn't even get enough signatures to qualify for the ballot. Okay, so there's already, generally speaking, a resistance to doing these recalls. And recalls, by the way, are a pain to accomplish. Now, just as an aside, that's how Mayor Steve Voss kind of got into politics in Poway. He organized a recall of Betty Rexford back in, 2010, 2011 or 12, back in that time frame. It was a kind of a rare thing here in Poway. And frankly, recalls, you need to get a lot of signatures, probably need to have a special election. You got to jump through a lot of hoops. So usually there's a very high threshold of violations or immoral activity that would drive the citizenry to go to such an extent to do a recall election. But there is a lot of momentum here. And I'm thinking to myself, is it? I mean, granted, Peter DeHoff is my representative. Peter DeHoff and again, I've never met him. I don't really have any relationship with him, but I see what he talks about, see what he comments on. And, just like any other politician, there are some things I agree with him and there are some things I disagree with him. But you're going to get that with any politician. And the categories where I disagree with him, I'm not sure if they necessarily rise to the level of a recall. Now, I, generally speaking, like the whole idea of recalls and the whole idea of threats of recalls, because it keeps local politicians on their toes. It keeps them engaged and hopefully listening to the community and implementing votes and law and policies that are largely aligned with the people that put them in office. So the concept of a recall is not necessarily anything I object to. Frankly, I think it's a great thing. It's an important part of democracy. But then I thought, does this rise to the level? Now, guess what happened? There is a brand new YouTube channel called Recall Peter DeHoff. And so if you want to go on YouTube, you check it out. And there is a 20-minute video that was taken from the live stream of the Poway City Council meeting. And it was this bully pulpit message of Peter DeHoff's. And I watched this, and it was amazing. It was amazing. And there's a lot of things to comment on. And I kind of want to go through it. And, what I probably should have done is played part of the video and hit pause, and watch it with you. But it's a 20-minute video. It probably ended up taking me an hour and a half by including all my comments on it. But he was responding in the city council meeting to the people that have been attacking him, that have been coming after him and other members of city council that have been for an election to replace Brian Pepin. And he had a lot to say, and he had a lot to get off his chest. And he went aggressively defending the appointment process and attacking those that were pushing for the public vote. People like Hiram Soto, Chris Cruz, there's a whole list of them. And frankly, I'm one of those too. I mean, I am a supporter of, letting people vote on putting representatives up on the city council. Because after all, if there's an appointment for a replacement for Brian Pepin in District 1, then if you do it as an appointment, then the people that pick the replacement for Brian Pepin, none of them are living in District 1 because they're the representatives from 2, 3, and 4. And then Mayor Voss doesn't live in District 1 either. I mean, it would be the opposite of representative democracy. But there's always hesitation. Do we want to do another election that's going to cost money? And really, it's not that much money. I mean, the number $300,000 was getting thrown around a lot. But, keep in mind that the city's budget is like over $100 million. I think it's like $130 million a year they spend. Can they afford an election? Yeah, they can. And then there's resistance to doing a recall, or not a recall election, but a special election by mail, because there's a lot of, Republicans that are suspicious of mail-in votes. And there's been a lot of objection to that. But I want to talk about what Peter said. And first of all, I love the fact that he did what he did. Now, I'm not going to say I agreed with what he said, but I like it when politicians get up there and at a city council meeting and will tell you what they think. And they're going to let you know what they're fighting for and why. And they'll explain themselves. And whether they do it in a public setting, like a city council meeting, or at a community forum, or in a newspaper column, those are all great. If they're podcast guests, and every politician is invited to be a guest on my podcast. If you'd like to join me here, if you're a candidate or a sitting politician. So Peter, if you want to join in the conversation, you're welcome to join me here in a future podcast. But I like the fact that he had something to say, and he was brave enough to go out there and say it. And I wish more of our politicians would do that. Sometimes you kind of wonder really what they're thinking, and people are trying to read between lines. And then there's a lot of conspiracy theories about what people think. But when they tell you, like Peter did, you're like, okay, here we go, face value. So one of the things he said is that, when you get an election, you don't know who you're going to get. You might have some good people, bad people. It's kind of a mix. He says, but generally, when we do this appointment process, we get a lot of really good candidates, and they're really qualified candidates. And we have an opportunity to kind of sift through them very carefully. And the good news is that in Poway, we've got tremendous talent. There's a lot of really good people here. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, that's true. There is a lot of good people. And yeah, you guys could make a well-informed decision. I don't question that. But the question is should you be the ones making that decision? And so this whole thing, the whole time he's talking, when some of our vocal minority was angry with him, thinking that Peter DeHoff was talking down to them from the at that city council meeting, to me, it seemed more like the philosopher king. It's kind of like Plato's cave, where, we as humans, we're regular people. We can't understand reality. We need a philosopher king to tell us what reality is, to tell us what's good and bad, and to really pontificate and be the one that can interpret, what is actually happening. And so I can understand the condescending tone to it. But come on, that's no reason to recall the guy. It's just who he is. And you can tell that he's an intelligent guy, and he's well-read. He understands a lot of policy, and he's kind of a technocrat, kind of a, like a wonky politician that really gets into the weeds of a lot of the detail. And I think, if I recall, Peter's background is in technology. I think he's an engineer, if I recall, but certainly he's a scientist. He's in that space. And so his approach to this is what you would expect from someone that's good at doing analysis. But, he definitely feels he has a right to share what his thoughts are. And frankly, he's elected. And that's the time to do it. You see it in Congress, where congressional representatives and senators will get up there and they'll speak, and they'll have 3 minutes or 5 minutes, or in some cases you'll see these guys up there with charts doing marathon messaging. And we're getting a little bit of that in Poway, and I think that's a really good thing, even if it makes the meeting longer. So what? I mean, that's what this meeting is about that discussion. So, but he was saying, we're going to be making decisions on water rates that are going to be enacted for the next 4 years. We're going to be making decisions on the city budget that are going to impact people in District 1 right away. But you guys want to have an election that's not going to happen until much later, so that the people on District 1 can't participate in having a representative to vote on the water rates or vote on the budget. And I just thought, oh, come on, man, don't go there. Because there's a way to do it. I mean, you could schedule an election, and I know you can't do it immediately. There's a timing. You got to synchronize with the registrar of voters. You got to schedule it, and maybe it's not going to happen for 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is. Yeah, but you can appoint someone in the short term, but you obviously would have a commitment to an election in the medium term. But they're not doing that. And so I just thought that was a bit of a cop-out. It was more like, you don't need democracy. Don't worry about it. We're smarter than everybody. We can do it for you. It's the philosopher king angle to it. He was scolding Hiram Soto. Apparently Hiram was doxing, I guess, releasing names or emails of people. I don't know the detail on that. I don't know if that's true, but that came off as a little bit of finger wagging up there. Again, it's a style thing. It's not like he's breaking the law, like the problem we have with Tony Blain. That's a serious problem. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention this, but with the Tony Blain story, he was making threats to some of his constituents about calling the police on them. I mean, that whole thing, the whole Tony Blain thing is just whacked. But anyways, it was interesting that Peter DeHoff kind of got into Hiram Soto's column that he published in the Pomerado News, San Diego Union Tribune, calling for the special election. And Hiram Soto brought up examples of Encinitas and Lemon Grove, and there was one other community, was a Coronado, I think, that were dealing with this problem. Do we do an appointment? Do we do a special election? And DeHoff actually went to some of those meetings, or knows some of those sitting city council members in those different cities, because he serves on other boards with them, which is common for city council members, like water boards and that sort of thing. And so Peter DeHoff's digging, and he's getting his information. He was basically calling out Hiram Soto, saying, what you're talking about here isn't real. It's not accurate. It's disconnected from reality. And I know I had such mixed feelings about this. Like, on one level, it's good. He's out there, DeHoff, doing his homework, talking to people, gathering facts. But when you're doing it all in defense of preventing the people from choosing their own representative, then that's not a good look. Okay. And, did Hiram Soto embellish the truth? I don't know. According to you, Peter DeHoff, he did. In the end, I think when you are saying to the people, we're not going to let you choose, that is just like a flat out violation of what democracy is supposed to be all about. Now, of course, Peter DeHoff, says, well, most of us up here have been elected by a democracy, and an appointment process is part of the democratic process. Okay, that's true, but come on. I mean, the whole idea of a democracy is that the people are the ones that are making decisions. And here and granted, it's not a pure democracy, and that's a whole other angle, but selecting your representative is an important thing, in my opinion. I mean, if you're going to have a local government, and the local government is going to make decisions about your community, then the people that are on that board that are making those decisions should be chosen by the people. Okay. Not by the other city council members. No matter how virtuous and how intelligent and how above board our philosopher kings might be on the city council, it's not really their job to do this sort of thing. I mean, yeah, according to the letter of law, I guess they have the ability to do an appointment. And they could do an appointment on the short term, but the right thing to do is do an election. But they didn't. They ended up doing the appointment, and I know that Chris Pikus was appointed. In that 20-minute clip, you hear a little bit about Peter DeHoff talking about Chris Pikus and his resume. And we all kind of knew he was the favorite going in. And Peter, to his credit, really praised Pete Neild, my good buddy, who was on my podcast talking about some of his innovative ideas for Poway. And Peter appreciated a lot of the things that Pete Neild had talked about. So that came out in it. So I really liked the speech in terms of him doing a speech. And I would love to see that from Jenny Maeda and from and from Chris Pikus as a newly appointed member. I want to hear more from these people. And the same thing is true, with Mayor Voss, we get enough of Mayor Voss. I mean, but we can always use more. I mean, I think the more that our local politicians are listening and speaking, the better, so rather than creating the appearance that a lot of things are happening behind closed doors. But it was something. And Peter DeHoff brought up another interesting dynamic, and it's an interesting one. I never really thought of it in these terms, about how there's a natural cycle to the election. We have the election every 4 years, or, if it's staggering, it's every 2 years, like we have in Poway, where, you go into election and people are heated and maybe divisive, and there's, good guy candidate against evil guy candidate, and they fight it out, and their supporters fight it out. And according to Peter DeHoff's perception of this is that, then you go through a natural healing process after that. And it's a natural part of the process that Thomas Jefferson talked about in the founding of America. And that the appointment is another way that healing process can occur, and that eventually we get to another election cycle in 2 or 4 years. Okay. I mean, I understand your point, Peter, but come on, you got to let people vote on these sorts of things. And I think it just has to be like a key priority in local government to have local representation. I mean, it's like a fundamental core pillar of what local government is supposed to be about. And so he made a very rational presentation from his point of view on why the appointment process was right, but I still don't buy it. Does that mean that I think he should be recalled? No, I don't. I don't think he is committed as flagrant of a sin or flagrant of a foul as certainly as Tony Blain. Even the recall effort on Mayor Voss, I mean, there were some, in my opinion, some good reasons to bring that forward to a vote. Whether or not the vote should have passed, I think, is debatable. There were certain things that Mayor Voss has done that I have not been a fan of. There are other things he does that I like. And that's just the way it is with most politicians. So Peter DeHoff now under fire. So Jenny Maeda must be thinking, oh my God, what did I get myself into? Because now she's elected. She was very brave. She got up on city council to run against Kalen Frank when no one else would oppose Kalen Frank. She's up there and she just looks right down the aisle, and she sees Peter DeHoff is under attack, threats of recall, sees Chris Pikus there that represents the seat that Brian Pepin had and all the controversy around the appointment there. And then who's the other one that I'm missing in here? Am I missing someone? I might be. And then of course there's Mayor Voss, who, Mayor Voss is a very visible icon here in Poway with his cowboy hat. And he's got haters and he's got supporters. And here we go. So the Poway, the city and the country, having a little drama at City Hall. And in a way, for me as a podcaster, it gives me something to talk about. So I like that. On a perverse level, it's kind of a little bit entertaining, but there's some serious things that are being discussed. And I'm hoping a lot of this stuff is going to unfold and we're going to see what happens. In my opinion, I don't think there's ever going to be enough traction to recall Peter DeHoff. I just don't see that happening. I encourage the people that are going for the recall to go for it. I think recalls are healthy. But I don't see that rising to the level of a recall. Tony Blain, I have no idea what's going to happen here. Tony Blain is a guy that is representing District 2. He could find himself in trouble with the law. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, there may be a recall around him. There's people that are calling on him to resign. He might fight back and, kind of, say, screw you. And I'm representing this, and this is why I'm in office. And this is why the people elected me. And I'm going to pursue my aggressive agenda. I think Tony Blain is going to be interesting to see. We'll see more info on him. Okay, we're talking Poway City Council. So much going on. And I enjoy covering local news here in San Diego County. If you have thoughts or comments on everything we're talking about, you can get involved in the community forum. If you type in your comment or question on Facebook, on X, or on YouTube, I'll see it up here on my screen, and I'll put you up on the screen, and I'll say your name and read your question, and we'll have a discussion about it. If that's something you're interested in, just drop your take in X, YouTube, or on Facebook. Couple more plugs before I get to my next topics. My next topics, by the way, are going to be immigration rally in Escondido, and I'm going to talk a bit about Donald Trump and trade and tariffs and all of that. But a couple of things. One of the areas, if you support what I'm doing here in my podcast, if you think, hey, this Riley guy's doing all right, maybe I don't necessarily agree with him, but at least we have someone talking about local content, you can support what I'm doing. There's a lot of ways you can do it. The easiest thing you can do is just like the show on Facebook, on X, or on YouTube. Give it a thumbs up, give it a heart, interact with this on social media. That shows that there's positive reaction. And then, if you want to go a step further, you can donate to what I'm doing. You can go to johnrileyproject.com. If you want to leave a contribution, totally voluntary, to fund what we're doing, you have an option to do that. If you want to get on my mailing list, just go to johnrileyproject.com. Tell a friend what we're doing, like, follow, share, and subscribe. If you want to be a supporter of what we're doing here on the podcast. And then, oh, by the way, I do another podcast twice a week with Lee Hacksaw Hamilton, the godfather of sports talk radio. So if you want to talk about the Padres, the Dodgers, the Chargers, the Rams, the Raiders, NBA, Luka, AD going out to Dallas, we talk NHL, we talk World Cup soccer, PGA, golf, so much going on in the world of sports. Love talking Aztec basketball, Aztec football. If you're into that, join us on Lee Hacksaw Hamilton, the podcast. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts, including on YouTube, on Facebook, on X. And we do the format similar, where we have a fans forum where you can get involved and ask questions and make comments. Okay, let's keep moving. The next topic I want to talk about here is the immigration rally that was in Escondido. And I know we've had some of these in Poway, on Poway Road, and I haven't driven by it in Poway. But I did drive past one of the ones in Escondido, and it was a week ago Sunday. So that was probably 9-10 days ago. And my mom lives in Escondido. So my wife and I were out there visiting my mom, and we're on our way home, and we're at the intersection of, where Highway 78 freeway kind of ends. I think that's Broadway. And there's like a big Toyota dealership there, and a shopping center. And it was right there at that intersection. And there were masses of people. And there were people on all 4 street corners. And that's a huge intersection because it's like a freeway exit. There are 4 corners there. And there were tons of people there. Young people, moms and dads, old people, Hispanic people, people that weren't Hispanic, a variety of different races that were out there. And they were all, really against the new immigration policy of Donald Trump, the ICE raids, the deportation, all of this. And there were a lot of signs there that I thought were very interesting. And so I just want to offer some thoughts and some ideas and some comments on this. Now, first of all, I loved it. I mean, there's some things that I would do differently if I were in their shoes. But generally speaking, I loved what they were doing. I mean, they were out there, free speech. It's kind of like all the Trump protesters that show up in Poway at Twin Peaks and Pomerado every Sunday. I like seeing them out there. Now, I'm not a Trump supporter. And a lot of the signs that they present out on that street corner, I strongly disagree with. but I love seeing them out there just because I like the whole idea of self-expression and of free speech. So on that level, when I saw all of these protesters out there, I liked that. I liked that they were actively engaged. And I know Escondido, I think, has had a history of being anti-immigrant. I think, it's been a little bit more of a right-wing city than other parts of San Diego County historically. And so there has been a lot of pro-Trump, pro-deportation messaging in Escondido. And there are a lot of Hispanic people that live there that are voicing themselves here as well. But there were lots of like friends and family. You could see everyone was out there. It was all a positive vibe. It was smiles, people honking horns. It was just generally a really good thing. Now, like for example, like on the screen here, here's a photo of a young lady holding a sign that says "America is built on the sweat and sacrifice of immigrants." And which, by the way, is true. It's also built on the sweat and sacrifice of others as well. But, generally speaking, most everybody here in America is an immigrant, whether they're from Central America or South America or Mexico, or my family is from Ireland. There are people here from Germany and Italy and Sweden. America was built by immigrants, and that's a good thing. It's something that part of our makeup, part of our values of America as being a nation of immigrants, in my opinion, is a good thing. It's interesting, though, how some people have come here, multi-generational Americans, and they just kind of conveniently forget that their ancestors came here during the great immigration wave between the Civil War and World War I. That's when my family came here, and I imagine a lot of others as well. So you see, we saw a lot of people out there with signs that were like this, that were basically promoting immigration and the value of immigration, and saying, we're not all criminals. Like Donald Trump was saying that, they're rapists, they're murderers, they're thieves, they're coming out of mental institutions, and oh, by the way, some of them are okay. I mean, that's just a bunch of BS. There are some bad folks that are immigrating, but geez, there's bad folks that are traveling across state lines in America. Generally speaking, the people here that are coming to America are coming here for all the right reasons. They're coming here to better their life. They want economic opportunity. They want more freedom. They want to escape the violence, of the drug cartels in parts of South America and Central America. So there is a lot of virtuous, rational reasons for a lot of people to want to be here. And frankly, given the history of America, they know that this is a nation of immigrants, and they were promoting that from that perspective. And I thought that was great. But there was also a lot of, how should I say this? And this is the angle that I thought, I'm not saying they're wrong in what they were doing and how they were doing it, but I'm saying I would do it differently. And that is, you saw a lot of the protesters waving Mexican flags, and you can see here on the photo on screen, I believe those are Mexican flags that have been converted into headbands. I think, there were a lot of people promoting Mexico, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if that's the right answer here. I don't know if you're really doing yourself any favors. And granted, I get it. You're upset with MAGA. You're upset with Trump, and you want to, and the MAGA guys and Trump guys are the ones waving the American flag. Which, by the way, I've often called them out, like the MAGA supporters here in Poway waving the American flag, chanting freedom, and then on the other side saying build a wall, or don't let a woman make choices about her own body. I mean, MAGA is generally freedom for me, but not for thee. But I just thought they were doing themselves a disservice by embracing the Mexican flag. Not that I have a problem with Mexico. Not that I have a problem with their freedom to wave whatever flag they want, but they're here in America. They want to be in America. They came to America, or their ancestors came to America for rational reasons. They're here because they want to be part of America. Now, obviously, they have maybe a Latin identity. Maybe they have a South American, a Central American identity. I get that. I mean, I have an Irish identity that goes way back. It's kind of an interesting tidbit about my history and my makeup, but it's not my primary defining piece of my identity. Here, I think if they were to use the American flag rather than the Mexican flag, they could essentially punch the MAGA people in the nose with their own message. Because the American flag, what does it represent? We hold these truths that are self-evident, that all men are created equal with inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what these immigrants are doing. They want to have a right to their own life. They don't want to be, they don't want to be the target of drug cartels. They don't want to be the target of ICE. They don't want to be the target of a police state. If they're coming here peacefully to raise their family and work and earn a living and live a good life, they should have the freedom to do it, just like my ancestors did, just like all the rest of the citizens that are here in America. So I think if they were waving the American flag and they say, we actually stand up for what the identity of America is about, I think that message would be very powerful. And it would also show a willingness to try to want to assimilate into American society. And what I mean by that is assimilate based on the values of America. That we have freedom. That's what America's about, is that we have the freedom to live our lives on our own terms, as long as we're not harming other people or violating the rights of other people. That's a core American ideal that I think, frankly, people on the right wing and the left wing have completely lost sight of. In both groups, they're scapegoating this group or scapegoating that group. It's freedom for me, but not for thee. You have a freedom to your own body, but not in this case with abortion and not in that case with vaccines. And there's a lot of distortion, a lot of crazy talk out there. But the whole idea of these immigration rallies, I think, would have a lot more power if they were waving an American flag and embracing the values of America, because that's why they're here. They want to be a part of the American society. What do you think? By waving a Mexican flag, is that saying, hey, what about us? Or is that really saying we're separate? We're a different group? Or would waving the American flag represent that you want to be an American? Or do you think people would confuse you with MAGA? I don't know. Again, protesters should speak the way they want. It's free speech. But I think there's a better way to do it. And that's my thought on that. We as a multi-generational Americans, we should be encouraging immigrants to come here and assimilate into society, to work, get a job, raise your family, just like our ancestors did, our great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents, wherever they came from. I mean, if people are doing that, and they're supporting themselves, they're all part of the melting pot of America. And by the way, we have a labor shortage. We need workers. Deporting workers is foolish. I mean, we need, and not all illegal immigrants are working in strawberry fields or building houses. I mean, illegal immigrants are pervasive throughout society. And that's good. We just need to find a way just to make them legal. So, give these people a green card, make it easy to be a legal immigrant. Now, a citizen is a whole other thing. I mean, that's where you got to pass a test and you got to be in America for a certain period of time. And then that's when you get to vote. You're in the privilege of voting. And, being a citizen, we can raise the standard on that if we choose. In a lot of ways, I don't know if that's really that big of a deal, but if we need to have a higher threshold for citizenship, I'm good with that. But immigration and getting a green card and having the legal right to work in America should be easy in the land of the free and the home of the brave. So again, my recommendation to these protesters, the ones that are protesting ICE, hey man, I'm with you. Morally, I am with you. I think your message would be more impactful by embracing American values and waving American flags and talking about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And on the other hand, those MAGA supporters that are out there waving American flags, I think you guys need to have a come to Jesus meeting and really ask yourself, when you say you're for freedom, what do you really mean? Because I see a lot of cases where you want to deport people and violate their freedom. So I think a lot of these people need to really ask themselves these questions. This is why I have so much trouble with Republicans and Democrats. This is why I'm independent. I support the whole notion of individual rights, that your life is yours to live. But there's just so many people in America that don't think that think that, well, okay, that's sort of true, but really these people don't really have a right to live their life. They need to be deported. Or these people don't really have a right to their own body. We need the government to manage that. Or, telling people what to do and how to live, even when they want to live a peaceful life. We have too much of that, too much of this authoritarianism that's dictating to people what to do and how to behave, when people should be free to live the way they want to live, as long as they're not harming anyone else. So what do you think? I want to go to one of the rallies, or at least drive by one of the rallies in Poway. I know they've been on, I think, Community Road and Poway Road, right by the Brigantine, I think is where I've been seeing this. And it strikes me that the organizers of these are likely similar to the organizers of the ones in Escondido, because I've seen some of the posts in social media, and I'm seeing the red, white, and green of the Mexican flag in a lot of their artwork. My suspicion is that we're going to see a lot of Mexican flags. And again, I'm not going to tell you you're doing it wrong. I'm just telling you there's a better way to do it. But I'm with you on the message, and I'm with you on what you're trying to accomplish. Okay, let's move on. Final topic of the day. And okay, we got Trump up here. There has been so much stuff going on with Donald Trump in this first, what has it been, 3 weeks or so since the inauguration? Flood the zone. There's a million things that are going on, and it's like there are so many things happening at once. It's impossible to focus on any one thing. It's impossible to really get a loud, focused voice in support or opposition to certain specific things, because there's so many things on the table. And there's so many things on the table that are real and important, and other things on the table that are nonsense and distractions and shiny objects to take your eye off the ball. I mean, this whole Gulf of America thing, changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico, the buying of Greenland, the taking over of the Panama Canal, Canada as the 51st state. These are interesting topics. These are things that people would love to talk about with their buddies over some beer, some interesting chatter to this. There's elements of it that sound interesting, but really these are all just distractions, because the things, it's always follow the money, so let's follow the money here for a minute. And I want to talk about this whole idea of trade and tariffs and everything else. Trump is going around. He's either lying, he's incompetent, doesn't understand basic economics, or both, when he says that Canada is ripping us off and China is ripping us off because we have a trade deficit, that we're subsidizing Canada because we have a trade deficit. That's the biggest bunch of baloney. It's nonsense. It's a lie, and it's completely disconnected from reality. Because what is a trade deficit? A trade deficit is when one side buys more goods and services than the other side buys. So in this case, Canada is buying less stuff from us, and we're buying more stuff from them. So there's more money going to Canada than coming from Canada. And Trump thinks this is a ripoff, but it's not, because we get goods and services in exchange for that cash. When we're spending money in Canada, we're getting lumber, we're getting aluminum, we're getting all other kinds of, we're getting maple syrup from Canada. We're getting the things that Canada provides. See, free trade is fair trade. Free trade are when two people or two entities, two corporations come together, and one person buys and the other person sells, and they reach an agreement on a price, and they freely exchange. And so, if you're going to buy something, for $100, you probably think it's worth more than $100. That's why you're willing to pay $100 for it. And the other person that's selling it for $100, they probably think to them it's worth less than $100 because maybe it only cost them $60 to create it. And they sell it for $100 and they're happy with the exchange as well. Free trade is win-win. Generally speaking, we have a free trade agreement in North America. Remember, we had NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, America, Mexico, Canada. Ross Perot, though, called it the giant sucking sound, where we would lose jobs to Mexico. But you know what? We have more jobs in America now than ever. We didn't lose jobs to Mexico. We've created more jobs net because trade is good for our economy. And in this particular case, if we're trading with Canada, those trades are win-win trades. Now, granted, the new deal that replaced the NAFTA was negotiated by Trump and his people in his first term, that he said was a better deal than NAFTA. And now he's saying that they're ripping us off on the same deal that he approved, which is, again, more nonsense. Now, is the trade agreement with Canada and Mexico pure free trade, meaning no restrictions, no tariffs? You know, it's just like going to the grocery store and buying something, and you don't have to sign off on government documents and meet certain government regulations and have to pay tariffs. No, there are some government controls there, but my understanding is that it's become more and more incrementally freer trade. And in my opinion, that's a good thing. You know, in fact, remember there was a similar plan when Hillary Clinton was running for president against Trump in 2016. What was the name of it? I can't remember the name of it, but it was essentially a free trade agreement between America and a lot of other Southeast Asian nations like Singapore and Vietnam and Cambodia, etc. That wasn't free trade, but it was much freer trade than we had with them in the past, and certainly freer trade than what America had with China. But what we have is a problem where people don't understand the economics of it. They don't understand really what tariffs are, because tariffs we pay. Tariffs change a trade from win-win to lose-lose. Because what happens when one side enacts tariffs, the other side will reciprocate and enact tariffs on the other side. So now Trump is doubling down now, putting more tariffs on steel and aluminum. I think it's going to be like 25%. And so now Canada is responding and putting more tariffs on goods that are imported to Canada. American goods going to Canada are now going to face resistance. So farmers in America and other manufacturers in America are now going to have trouble selling their goods in Canada. And by the way, the auto industry is so cross-border up there in the Great Lakes region. You've got products and components of products that are getting moved across the border multiple times. You're going to tariff it each time it goes back and forth? That just jacks up the price for everybody. Tariffs are lose-lose deals. Tariffs are bad economic deals. It is very, very rare to encounter a reputable economist that supports tariffs. And it's true whether they're left-leaning or right-leaning. It's only in this new era of Trump and this national identity, America first, that is creating this, to think of it in national terms. But trade deficits are meaningless. I have a trade deficit with Costco. I give Costco money. They give me goods. Every time I buy something at Costco, I'm losing hundreds of dollars, but I'm gaining in return food, housewares, clothing and other things, dog food, other things that I get at Costco, or whether I'm going to Target or Walmart. I have a trade deficit with every retailer I do business with. Does that mean my Costco's ripping me off? No, of course not. It's just trade, and trade is win-win. But when we tariff it, and then the other side fights back on the tariffs, it slows down trade. It slows down economic growth. It adds higher costs to goods, and ultimately it leads to like a death loop. A circular death loop where you end up doing, you inflict damage on your own people, both sides doing it. So Trump, it's nonsense what he's doing with these tariffs that are coming up. And so, yeah, first of all, Canada and Mexico are not ripping us off. And you see him doing these tariffs, and he's not really explaining why. He's just using these bogus reasons. But really, I think what he's trying to do is be Mr. Dealmaker. So then he could take it off the table or postpone it if he gets something from Canada or Mexico. So it's all of this gamesmanship, sort of poker playing with bluffing, which I get that to a degree, but he's doing it on the basis of lies, on the basis of economic incompetence. And it's shocking to me that more people don't call him out for this. And I think the reason is I think our American education system is failing our people, because people are not well versed enough in basic economics and why trade is good and why free trade is the best kind of trade of all, because free trade is win-win. And free trade, both the buyer and the seller prosper. Both the communities and nations of the buyers and sellers both prosper when there is free trade. But we're ending up with this nonsense. So, I've often commented that the tariffs, by the way, are not just a Republican thing. Biden did tariffs. In many cases, Biden expanded the tariffs that Trump implemented in his first term. In other cases, Biden increased tariffs on imported goods from China, like, for example, electric vehicles from China. China has actually been revolutionary in a lot of the things they've done with EVs to make them inexpensive. And you would think that EVs generally would be less expensive than a gasoline, internal combustion vehicle. There's less moving parts. Electric vehicles, like, remember slot cars? I used to play slot cars when I was a kid, still do sometimes as an adult. Electric cars are like slot cars. There's a lot less moving parts. They should be efficient to build, especially as the technology with batteries gets better and better. And if, in the case of Democrats, if you're fighting against climate change, if you're trying to virtue signal that you want to lower the carbon footprint in America, then why in the hell did Biden add a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles? Well, the reason is that he does it for the same reasons that Trump is doing it. It's just to stroke the back of American manufacturers. And people in America think that's a righteous thing, buy America. That's the American thing to do, and buy America. But it's not. It's not. Because when, in this case, you can buy an inexpensive, decent quality EV from China that's relatively inexpensive, or you could spend a lot on domestically made EVs, whether they're from Detroit, from Ford or Chevy, or whether they're from Tesla or whoever. EVs right now are expensive. And even with the rebates that are offered by the federal government and the state government, they're still expensive. But they could be so much more less expensive, but American companies can't compete. So when you enact tariffs, the tariffs benefit the very few at the expense of the very many. The tariffs benefit the workers in Detroit, the auto manufacturers in Detroit, and their investors and their employees and their management. But they make everything else more expensive across the board. So the rest of society is paying more for vehicles when we could have advantage to lower cost vehicles to import. And by the way, when we buy less expensive quality goods that are imported, then we have more money left over in our wallet to spend in other parts of the economy, including investing in American economy, in American businesses, in categories where America has a strategic advantage. America shouldn't be like this self-sufficient prepper nation that we need to build and make everything ourselves. No. I mean, we need to have the ability to do that in an Armageddon, Mad Max situation. If you had to get to that, yeah. But we should be encouraging trade with other nations around the world. That's how we have peace around the world. Is when there's trade, there's generally peace. But when there's also trade, you find different countries specialize in different categories. And companies in those countries are going to have strategic advantages that allow them to produce these goods potentially at a lower price. Maybe because labor is less expensive. Maybe because they have access to resources that are available in their nation. There could be any number of reasons. Or maybe other nations just happen to be more innovative in the way that they go about producing new products. And so, people might be willing to pay more for a product that's better, that's a better mousetrap. But in the end, I think free trade is the way to do this. So all of this tariff nonsense that we're hearing from Trump, again, BS. And there's some people that believe in it religiously. They think that tariffs are a way for America to fight back. But I'm telling you, it's a self-inflicted wound. Tariffs harm you. Tariffs make what you're buying more expensive. And I'm not talking about inflation with the dilution of the dollar and everything that happened with COVID. We're not even talking about avian flu and the price of eggs. I'm talking about imported goods. And I have a strong objection to Trump on this. And I'm saying this in my podcast with the desperate hope that people might be a little bit more well-informed on this. So, yeah, Trump is doubling down on his tariffs. It's his art of the deal, BS. Is it working? Maybe. I mean, I know he got some concessions from Mexico and Canada, but according to some, those were concessions that Biden had previously agreed to. I don't know. I just think of it as him kind of trolling other nations, also virtue signaling to his base. But just keep your eye on the ball. Keep your eye on the money. That'll tell you something. Keep your eye on how all this is going on, because so much of this are bluffs. So much of this are distractions. So they'll get people focused on these things, so these other things are not focused upon. All right. Gosh, there is a ton of other things that we could talk about, but I'm going to wrap up this podcast. We have a modest here, like we have 11 live stream viewers. Thank you very much if you're watching or viewing. I don't normally expect very many people to watch the live stream. I kind of showed up unannounced. I hadn't scheduled this, but if you're watching and you're viewing, thank you. Thank you for being a part of this. I appreciate that very much. I want to do more of this. And I think part of my challenge has been, I'm doing so much with Hacksaw. I had the other challenge where I was physically moving my studio from my living room into one of the bedrooms. And that's taken a lot of effort to get that organized, but I got a lot done. And I got more to do in here, but I've got like my own little zone. And so I'm more excited to kind of share my message. I am commenting on local news, local politics, but I do want to kind of talk a little bit more about statewide and national, and maybe even international issues, because it just generally it gets more views, it gets more clicks in social media, particularly on my YouTube channel. I'm going to still comment on local news. And, when I do the live streams, I get a modest number of viewers. But when I take this and I split it up, like today I had 4 segments: Tony Blain and Peter DeHoff and immigration and Trump. Then when I split those up into 4 different segments, then we get a lot more opportunity for people to view just the topics that they're interested in. Okay, friends, this is the John Riley Project. This is episode, what is it? I think it might be 341. So just want to thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening, and look forward to be back with you next time. Thank you very much.